Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to the 14th episode of Season 13 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown, and this is the only weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Okay, well, before we dig into this week's song, we'll head over to social media, as we usually do, from 3 weeks ago now. And I appreciate you all coming along with me virtually to Gainesville. I got some really good feedback on the 6 Degrees of Tom Petty episode, which was fun to do live in the room, and I'd encourage you all to play it with any of your Pettyhead friends. And I had a few people messaging me to tell me that they could get back from, various of those artists that I covered in the episode to Tom in fewer steps than I managed, and that's what I love to hear. So thanks to everyone for engaging with that little bit of fun. The poll for When a Kid Goes Bad came back largely as I expected, with 23% of you giving the song a 6 out of 10 or below, and 77% of you rating it a 7 to 9 out of 10, which more or less aligns with my feelings about the track, as I gave it an 8 out of 10. So remarkably, that makes The Last DJ joint third in my rankings if you look at only the first 5 songs on each album, with only Wildflowers and Hard Promises sitting ahead of it. So after 5 songs, Wildflowers knocked in a perfect 10 out of 10 on average, which I stand by completely when you look at what those opening 5 songs are. But before I started this podcast, I don't think I'd have predicted that The Last DJ would pass Damn the Torpedoes, again, just on the first 5 songs, and sit alongside Full Moon Fever with an opening 5-song average of 9.4. But this goes to, what I say so often on the show. Tom didn't slow down in the latter years of his career. He just kept finding more great songs. And I'll post on social media maybe the current rankings so that you can take a look at that. Over on Facebook, we only had a couple of comments on When a Kid Goes Bad. The wonderful Dallas Helliker, who I think is definitely overdue a visit back to the pod, posted a photo of the marquee from the Beacon Theatre from the Last DJ tour. And when I asked if they played the song that night, he replied, no, he played it on the 21st, second show of the residency. I went to the last 2 shows on the 25th and 26th. But 14 years ago today, I was one of about 500 people lucky enough to attend the show at Cal State Northridge, the fundraiser for the local radio station KCSN. They did play it that night. So as that song was played only 27 times live, at least according to Setlist FM, so of course it might be a few out. It's pretty cool, Dallas, that you got to see it. It's one of my favourites from the Olympic recording because the Heartbreakers are just such a great blues band that when they slip into that mode, it's just dynamite. Kelly Ward simply commented, Tom, always caring, always. And that's the truth, and something Pete and I talked about on Sunday's bonus episode. Tom's generosity of spirit and honesty in his creative and personal lives always shines through as that light that we all follow. So I wonder if we're going to hit a little bit of a commenting lull here in this midsection of the album as we head into the material that, that might not necessarily be those sort of 10 out of 10s and the tracks that people really instantly reach for. And after such a strong opening, it might be difficult to maintain the momentum, but there are some tracks coming up in the second half of this album that are absolute standouts for me. Anyway, as always, I enjoy hearing your thoughts and love to hear those differing opinions to see where my tastes or takes differ from yours. So let me know what you think of this week's song, which is track 6, Like a Diamond. In Conversations with Tom Petty, author Paul Zollo remarks to Tom that Like a Diamond is a haunting song, to which Tom replies, yeah, I like that song too. It's such a positive song, and I think there's redemption and hope in that record, and that's a good positive thing to say. But to make that point, I had to show the bad guy, Joe. But unfortunately, that was so sensational, I guess, that was where the focus went. So this is really cool, as it vindicates my opinion that I sort of put forward during the Joe episode, that that's an essential song on The Last DJ. And I swear I didn't read ahead to pull that quote as I was writing the Joe episode, but it is strange how one part of a larger narrative can become the focus for people when they look back on a specific album. And as I've previously noted, some critics were quick to accuse Tom of biting the hand that feeds, rather than evaluating The Last DJ and Joe within the larger framework of what Tom was trying to say with the record. So tracks like today's song end up being overshadowed. And at that Olympic Theatre gig, Tom introduces this song by saying, there's a lot of hope left in this world, and this song is supposed to symbolise that. Along with Dreamville on this album, Like a Diamond is one of those rare unicorns in Tom's catalogue in that it doesn't open with a guitar. Instead, we have a wistful, beautiful combination of piano, bass, and strings. Of course, the strings orchestrated and arranged by John Bryan. It's another immediate shot of sonic nostalgia that harkens back to the simultaneous grandeur and tenderness of some of John Lennon's finer ballads. That Imagine-esque piano part is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in that regard, but there's a sepia-toned ache to the way this one is constructed sonically that allows you to feel a certain heart sickness before a single word has been sung, just from the tone and the gentle cadence of the opening 8 bars. When the drums and the guitar come in after the first 4 bars, you could easily hear this track slotting seamlessly into Lennon's Walls and Bridges era. There's a gorgeous dryness to that snare that is consistent with the rest of the album and a holdover from George's work with Rick Rubin on Wildflowers through Echo. It isn't washed out in reverb, they're not trying to make the snare sound like a cannon shot, but that crisp, dry crack really punctuates the rhythm beautifully. When Tom's vocal comes in, this production is fascinating to me. It's a double-track vocal, but what's interesting is the lead vocal here is mixed down the middle, but that double track really feels like it's mixed slightly to the left. Now, I'm not sure if that's just a trick of the brain, but if you listen under headphones, it does feel like the song is leaning slightly to the left. Lyrically, we have this mysterious abstract verse that Tom croons softly to us. Madmen crawl across the wall, night gets away. Kings all fall, and queens chase men, and saints all sin, and good things all must end. It's one of those bone-weary first acts that Tom is adept at writing. And if you think about that same quality, and I think I'd highlighted that in Echo, there's something of a resignation in this opening salvo. It's a rueful, appraising guy rather than a first-person perspective of a specific scene. There isn't a dramatic turnaround into the chorus after this verse. We simply get a single floor tom hit from Steve Ferroni, and Tom brings in a harmony vocal part. The strings step a little further forward on the stage, and that major fifth to root seesaw pattern just rocks us gently through Tom's positive affirmation that she goes on forever, this unnamed girl. But then we have one of those wonderful little petty twists. After 3 bars of this statement of permanence, Tom lets us hang for a bar with no vocals. Now in the verse, and I didn't talk about the chord progression, it's an interesting one because it goes D to B minor to G sharp minor 7th, which is that's not in the key of D at all, and it gives you this sort of fantastic moment before it resolves to that G major 7, but in the chorus, the B minor is replaced with the G major before again moving to that G sharp minor 7th. And I had to head over to Tim Bullman's brilliant Judge Timber's YouTube channel to make sure that I was hearing this one right, and sure enough, he talks about that B minor chord having the G sharp added as you lift one finger off one string. So it's really probably quite a natural thing for a guitarist to do while they're messing around, but it's a change that you'd never really come up with on a piano. We get that full bar hang after Tom sings, yes, she's going to shine forever, and when he comes back in on the Like a Diamond line, we're sitting on that very expensive chord before we drop back to the G major 7. The bass just moves from G to G sharp back to G, giving that 3-chord sequence an incredibly interesting, suspenseful vibe that I just love. It's one of those little nerd moments that pop up in petty songs where, as a musician, you just think, whoa, hang on, what's he playing there? And then you think, oh man, that's cool. So I'll leave a link in the episode notes to the tutorial for this one because when you watch Tim break this one down, it's really cool how that interesting little change happens. When Tom tells Paul Zolo that it's such a positive song, I think there's redemption and hope in that record. You hear what he means in this chorus. There's that heat haze quality in singing like a diamond in the sunlight. As the light refracts off the surfaces, it can dazzle you briefly and sparkle with a really kinetic energy. And the assertion that she goes on forever feels like it's Tom remarking that love lasts indefinitely and isn't bound by the impermanence of our corporeal form. It's an absolutely beautiful sentiment and a gorgeous presentation in this chorus. In the second verse, we get a lyrical switcheroo again from Tom as he zooms into a first-person point of view. Big full moon above the road, I'm a long, long way from home. Gotta light my way down this highway to get to her. Again, there's longing here, and again, that sleepy tiredness, that fatigue. But there's no despondency or sadness. And this type of switch of perspective can be tricky to pull off sometimes. Over on one of my other shows, The Ultimate Catalog Clash, my pal Corey and I talk about this sometimes as it can be a distraction when it's channeled through the hands of a lesser writer. If you don't know what perspective a song is trying to present, its message can sometimes become muddled, but because Tom is so adept at setting up these little 3-act plays or related but not narratively chronological vignettes, it doesn't feel like we're straying off topic or moving away from the center of the song. I think on other episodes I've compared it to when a film will give you a flashback sequence or a brief interlude to tie into a separate part of the story. This second verse grounds us into a narrative's frame of reference so that we know that the unnamed girl of the chorus is loved by someone who is longing to get back to her. The next iteration of the chorus follows exactly the same pattern as the first, and there really isn't any need to start layering up additional parts to the overall arrangement in this one because it's exactly this laconic, lazy tempo and sparseness that lends the track its charm and makes its heart beat. We then have another fantastic moment in this song as the piano plays a short step-down transition lick in that B minor before Mike Campbell's scorching lead guitar tone cuts in to move us into the solo. And this one's always reminded me of the second solo in Pink Floyd's Comfortably Numb from The Wall. It's even in the same key and damn near the same tempo. But Mike doesn't shred initially. He gives us that sort of red-hot polka blast of lead guitar, then nothing for 2 full bars, leaving the piano and strings again to push the boat down this melodic river before coming back in again to play those fantastic bluesy pentatonic licks. It's all about the restraint that Mike uses here, though, that adds to the solo's impact. Most guitar players would play straight through this section, but Mike milks the drama of those minor chords and the resolutions back to the major. And let's talk a little bit about the structure of this solo too. There are 2 halves to this solo section, and they're 5 and 6 bars respectively. So straight away, that's somewhat atypical, especially for a blues solo, which you would usually go over 8 bars or 12 bars. And the chord progression in both halves is different. I love this. The progression in the first 5 bars is D, B minor, A, F sharp minor, G. So we're hearing that F sharp minor for the first time in the song, but the second half then starts on the B minor instead of the D and follows the shape from there. So B minor, A, F sharp minor, G again, but then we move to E minor before resolving to the major fifth, in this case, A major. That is an absolutely superb piece of writing, folks. That F sharp minor to G is just that half step up from the minor to major, and if you know the song The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face by Roberta Flack, you'll hear it used there too. But that unexpected E minor, coming after the B minor and the F sharp minor, but then pushing us back up to that A major, is just spectacular and one of my absolute favourite moments on this album. And I used the word grandeur earlier in the episode, and it's applicable again here, as Tom eschews the traditional rock and roll shapes that you'd expect. It's utterly beautiful, and I love, love, love this solo section. Okay, folks, it's time for some petty trivia. Your question from last week was this. John Scott's DJ pal, Charlie Kendall, who helped John get Breakdown onto the airwaves, was working with which Los Angeles radio station when he and John went to the Whiskey A Go-Go to see the Heartbreakers play? Was it A, KWST, B, KMET, aka the Mighty Met, C, KHJ 930 AM, or D, K-Rock FM? And man, that's a lot of initials. Okay, well, K-Rock FM grew out of KPPC FM in the early 70s and transformed in the late 70s into a cutting-edge punk and new wave station, becoming the definitive modern rock voice of Los Angeles. Through the 80s and 90s, it championed alternative bands from R.E.M. and The Cure to Nirvana, No Doubt and Green Day, and it's still branded today as the world-famous K-Rock, home to events like the Almost Acoustic Christmas. KHJ 930 AM in Los Angeles reinvented itself in April 1965 with the tight, fast-paced Boss Radio Top 40 format, developed by programmer Bill Drake and Ron Jacobs, emphasizing short DJ breaks and a compact, hit-heavy playlist. Through the late 60s and early 70s, it became one of America's most influential top 40 stations, and its Boss Radio approach was widely copied around the country. K-Met, aka the Mighty Met, was a legendary Los Angeles FM rock station coming in at 94.7 megahertz. It went on air in 1966 and became one of the pioneering underground, in quotes, progressive rock stations in the US, nicknamed the Mighty Met. It dominated LA rock radio in the late 70s, pulling huge ratings around 1978 to 1980, before signing off for good on February 14th, 1987, when the frequency flipped formats. K-Met was also the home to one Jim Ladd, who we've already talked about this season and most likely will again. So that means your answer to this question is KWST, an FM station at 105.9 in LA that flipped from beautiful music to a progressive rock AOR format on December 31st, 1974, and branded itself as K-West 106. It became known for the deeper album tracks and early spins of artists like Gentle Giant, Bebop Deluxe, J. Giles Band, positioning itself as an edgier alternative to K-Met and KLOS in the mid-70s. In his superb memoir, Tom Petty and Me, author John Scott writes, "One of my closest friends, Charlie Kendall, had just started working as music director at a new rock station, KWST-FM, in Los Angeles. K-West was going against the mighty Met, the only pure rock FM station at the time. Charlie was a well-respected programmer and DJ who could turn around a station's ratings on a dime. His track record preceded him. He had the first top 10 FM morning show in 1975 in Cleveland, then he did it again in Dallas. And now he'd been transferred to LA to do the same thing. I knew if I could get Charlie to listen to this album, there might be a chance of airplay on K-West. I gave Charlie a call on that fateful day on August 1977 and asked if I could go to his Sunset Strip apartment to play him something extraordinary. I arrived at his doorstep that evening with my new favourite band's album in my hand. Charlie sat cross-legged on the floor, put on his expensive Sennheiser headphones and turned up the volume. The music started, and I could tell by watching his body language that he was getting into it. He began to sway along with the music. He was smiling, bobbing his head with the beat. I knew he heard it. I knew he was feeling it. He was hooked. Sweet confirmation to a promo man. Charlie removed his headphones and stared at me with stoned, glazed eyes. This album is fucking incredible. And if you haven't read John Scott's book yet, you really, really ought to. And he has his regular Christmas period 2-for-1 sale on right now on his website, so you can get a signed copy of the book and you'll get a free one to give away to a friend. So, we're heading back down to Florida for your question this week, which is this. In the early 80s on WRBQ-FM Tampa, Scott Shannon and Cleveland Wheeler invented which radio format that is still hugely popular to this day? Is it A, Drive Time Comedy Hour, B, Sunrise Soundtrack, C, FM Freeform Breakfast Show, or D, Morning Zoo? Okay, back to the song. Right, more subtle chicanery here. Listen to Steve Ferrone's snare for the last 4 bars or so of that solo. Producer George Draculius, along with engineers Richard Dodd and Jim Scott, are playing tricks on us. The last hit of the snare in the solo and the first hit of the snare in the last verse sound like 2 completely different drums. The solo snare has more weight to it, where the first hits in the verse almost sound like the snares on the bottom of the drum have been pulled off a little to get more of that top skin tone coming through. It's a slightly more musical snare. But there's a beat where the fuller snare comes back in toward the end of the first half of the verse. So I don't know what these cats are playing at, and I've never noticed that before, but it's super cool. So I suspect that what could be the case is maybe they had Steve play the song through twice using a different snare on each pass, and then punched in both different snares at different times in this section just to give the song a sort of a slightly unusual quality that likely no one but an over-analytical music nerd might notice 23 years later. This third verse pulls us back to the more abstract and philosophical. Deacons steal and Ma can't feel if you're lonely. And behind the wheel, when the ground gives way, you have to pray to the unknown and hope it's real. I love how Tom constructs this lyric. There are 4 lines in each half of the verse, so 8 lines in all, but the first 3 are one sentence, and then the other 5 are the second sentence. So you get Deacons steal and Ma can't feel if you're lonely. That's your first sentence. And then, and behind the wheel, when the ground gives way, you have to pray to the unknown and hope it's real. So just when you read it as a sentence, again, we talk about this lots with Tom's writing. He has that way of not always worrying about whether what he wants to say is going to fit form. He'll make the form fit what he wants to say. It would never occur to me to write a lyric in that way. And it's another reason why this guy sits at the very top table for me, especially when you really start picking apart what he's doing on a seemingly throwaway middle album track. In this last chorus, we have a response vocal from Scott Thurston singing She Goes On, and then on underneath Tom's lead, and we have that beautiful wee-oo, that sort of backing vocal, which Judge Timbers marvelously observed is a huge tip of the hat back to Brian Wilson. Right after that, we also hear a very subtle couple of guitar notes that I think are volume swelled, so there's no attack on the note. But not a huge grand adornment, just that extra little bit of colour in this last section of the song. And before we punch home that final title line, like a diamond in the sunlight, we have one more repeat of the She Goes On Forever part. Then we have this simply gorgeous outro. A second Mike Campbell solo? Not in this case. We hand the reins over to Ben Montench and Steve Ferroni. Ben Mont plays the most delicate, sentimental, clean lines over that root chord, which we hold on for 8 bars. And I think, too, that we've snuck a synth pad in while no one was looking here, which decays out after that last cymbal hit. I don't think that's the orchestration. And I mentioned Steve Ferroni in this section, too, who starts adding little climb-down fills on the toms in a very sort of, it feels like a Roy Orbison type of thing to do. So there are abundant tips of the hat back to Tom's friends and influences in this one that make it feel like a very deeply personal and nostalgic song. Okay, Pettyheads, that's it for this week. I've always really liked this song as part of the album, but never really listened to it closely until sitting down to write this episode. And that's happened a lot over the course of the last 4 and a bit years of recording this show. Songs you don't necessarily expect to reveal hidden depths do so with startling regularity. Does this song have a line the equal of "most things I worry about never happen anyway"? No, probably not. Does it have a dramatic weight to it in the vein of "It's Good to Be King"? I wouldn't necessarily say that either, but does it hold its own as an imperiously patient, superbly constructed gem hidden in the middle of an album that most people forgot about? Absolutely it does. So for me, Like a Diamond is a super solid 8 out of 10. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Boneless Podcasting Network, which is a loose collective of podcasting friends and acquaintances brought together and championed by the inimitable Chaz Scholz, who actually has a new Tragically Hip podcast that you can go listen to, which is super, super cool. I'll leave a link maybe in the episode notes to that as well. Go check out the roster of the Boneless Podcasting Network, though, by clicking on the link in the episode notes. You can also check out my other podcast, Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I co-host with my very, very, very best friend, Randy Woods, who performs all the music you hear in this show. And Randy also, I think I've told you this before, he composed and sings the intro music. Super cool guy and a phenomenally talented musician in his own right. You can also check out the Ultimate Catalog Clash that I co-host with one of my other very, very good friends, Mr. Corey Morissette, who is currently in season 5 of And the Podcast Will Rock, but is also helping me out with Black Crows on the Ultimate Catalog Clash. We are talking about Amorica at the moment, so go check out that show, especially if you're into the Crows. It's been a good season so far. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project, and on Blue Sky at Tom Petty Project. Go follow, like, subscribe as applicable, do all those things. And again, please leave a review or a rating if you haven't already, and keep talking to me on social media, and I will keep reading out your comments on the show. As your weekly reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way, so when you're looking for Tom's music, please go buy it from a local independent record seller, or go buy it from from store.tompetty.com. Go buy official music, and if you're going to stream it from official platforms like, your Spotify, your Apple Music, those kinds of places. But try to avoid Spotify as much as you can, folks. It's kind of the least good of all the streaming platforms. If you're looking for merch, you can go to store.tompetty.com, and if you're looking for merch for this show, please go to store.tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook, and make sure you check out Tom Petty Radio on Channel 31 on Sirius XM. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week to start the second half of the 12 tracks that make up The Last DJ with the riff-heavy Lost Children. Bye-bye.